Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, I am not in my normal setup, but when hype cards drop, hype cards get talked about. So we're doing this, we're jumping into it. 4 new DRACOSLAYER cards. Yeah, like the Pendulum archetype for DRACOSLAYER. They had their heyday. I still think they're relatively solid, like Pendulum cards. They just kind of need like a little bit of an oomph boost, and I think this might be it. I took a quick look at them last night, but I don't remember them that well, so we'll go through them together today. So I'm not going to be able to put them up on the screen, so if you want, open them in another tab, have them in there so you can read along with me, or just I'll read them as we go. So let's jump into it. Let's start off here with our first card here, Ignis Phoenix, the DRACOSLAYER. This is a level 4 Fire Warrior Pendulum effect monster. Fire Warrior, so this is actually searchable off of Durendal, I believe. This is also searchable off of Reinforcement of the Army. Some things to note. Pendulum scale 7, 1700 attack, 1900 defense, level 4, 17, yeah, said it again. You can only use the Pendulum effect of this card's name once per turn. During your main phase, you can shuffle one face-up Pendulum monster from your X deck into the deck to add a DRACOSLAYER or Ignite monster from your deck to your hand, except a Pendulum monster. That's pretty sweet. Okay, it can't be a Pendulum monster though, which is weird. Very strange. So a couple things on this effect. You already have to get a Pendulum monster in your extra deck, face up, to shuffle back. Then you can add one of those, but it can't be a Pendulum. That just seems so weird. Why would it add a non-Pendulum? It's still a search, so it's like not terrible, but just, you know, kind of weird. This card is always treated as an Ignite card, by the way, so that's another thing. It is searchable off of some of the Ignite cards as well. You can only use the monster effect of this card's name once per turn. If this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effects, you can special summon a DRACOSLAYER or Ignite monster straight from the deck, except for another copy of itself. And if you do, it is treated as a tuner. I think this is probably the better effect of the two overall. I do think that Pendulum effect could be like something specific if like you want to make use of one of the like big DRACOSLAYERs or one of the non-Pendulum Ignites. I just think that non-Pendulum clause makes it so awkward. I felt like this card could have been so much better of like a generic Pendulum card at being able to just search specific scales, being able to search other utility DRACOSLAYER Pendulum monsters. But because it's non-Pendulum, it just becomes a little bit more specific, and I don't know if you want to play those in the type of Pendulum deck you'd be playing this in. But the second effect's really solid. I mean, if it's popped, summon one out of the deck. That helps you get into stuff like Beyond the Pendulum early on in combos to get a ton of resources going. I don't hate that. I like the monster effect a lot. Moving on, and he's also searchable. Keep that in mind, extra searchable with being a warrior and a fire warrior at that. Moving on here, we move to Majesty Pegasus, the DRACOSLAYER. These are all like new Pendulum versions of the true Draco monsters, right? The first one was Ignis Heat. This one's kind of based on Majesty Maiden, and the third one, Dynamite Knight. But yeah, this is a level 4 wind spellcaster monster, 1500 attack, 1500 defense, Pendulum scale 2. Nice. I like that those have been relatively high scale, relatively low scale. You can only use the Pendulum effect once per turn. If you have a DRACOSLAYER or Magispector card in your other Pendulum zone, you can add a DRACOSLAYER Pendulum monster with a different original name from your deck to your hand. Then you can destroy one card in your Pendulum zone. That's pretty good. I like that. I mean, are you really going to build a full-on Magispector deck? I doubt it with DRACOSLAYERs, but you know, this does give a little more validity to it, gives you a little bit more turbo. We talk about this all the time. Like, effects like this kind of read like they're a 1-for-1, but they're really a +1 because that card you pop in your Pendulum zone is just going to end up being Pendulum fodder later on anyway. So you're not really losing a resource to get a resource. You're kind of getting a resource and sending that resource, the first one, to a place where you're going to get it back anyway. So you kind of just go +1. It's really solid. All right, this card is always treated as a Magispector card. Also nice to include. It's a wind spellcaster also, which like all of the Magispector interrupting cards like need on the field, so that works out. All right, 2 effects on this one. The first one, let's see, second effect once per turn. The first effect is not. Quick effect, you can discard this card as cost. Until the end of this turn, your opponent cannot target DRACOSLAYER monsters you control with card effects. Also, they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So quick effect protection, that's actually pretty interesting. Depending on what kind of DRACOSLAYER monsters you're ending on, but that's actually pretty good. Some of them are pretty beefy, so they're already pretty big, make them untargetable and indestructible. You can blank some removal for sure on that. And the second effect of this card is Pendulum summoned or special summoned by a DRACOSLAYER card's effect. You can add any field spell from your deck to your hand, then discard one card. Are you kidding me? Add any field spell from deck to your hand. That's actually crazy. You do discard a card, but man, as long as you've got a card in hand that you're okay to discard, that is so crazy. This card becomes like a pretty insane, like, in my opinion, like, I would say, beyond the Pendulum target, like just search this out of the deck, and then when you Pendulum summon it, you just get a free search for whatever field spell that like gets you into another engine. I just think of like Magical Meltdown, and then you go through a Magical Meltdown line for an extra interruption. Like, that's pretty solid. You do discard, but it's a 1-for-1, not a minus, and not a -1, so we're fine. And the field spell you search is probably going to let you go super plus anyway. Very, very spicy. Next up here, we move to Dynamite Power Load, the DRACOSLAYER. Level 4 water machine. We'll pick it up a little bit here. This one is like part Dynamist, helping, you see how all of these kind of support another archetype as well. This one supports Dynamist. 1700, 1800 for the stats, so pretty decent. Pendulum scale 6, just like the Dynamists tend to be. I think they tend to be, what, scale 3 and scale 6. You can only use the Pendulum effect once per turn. You can target one DRACOSLAYER or Dynamist card in the other Pendulum zone. Special summon it. That's actually not bad. Nice little extension. Plus, because of the stats that the Dynamists have, they facilitate like Bahamut plays. They facilitate the Cyber Dragon. What's the Cyber Dragon I'm thinking of? The rank 6 that you slap on Nova. All that stuff. You can facilitate him pretty well. There's just a handful of really good extra deck monsters that the deck kind of facilitates if you can get their monsters out. They just don't have enough turbo cards to get there. This card's always treated as a Dynamist card, of course. You can only use the monster effect once per turn. If this card is tributed, you can add a face-up DRACOSLAYER or Dynamist Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, except for this copy, or this card. That's fine. I think the Dynamists do have some cards that tribute their cards, especially some of their traps. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. If they do, that's decent, because you just leave this up, like tribute it to obviously get the trap effect, and then this floats into another resource. That's really good if you can set up boards where like you have decent interruption and then you float into more follow-up, because the worry about Pendulums always is if they can barrel through your interruptions and then clear your scales, you could be shit out of luck. But if your interruptions also guarantee you scales back in the hand, it gives you a way to grind on the follow-up, which is really huge. But yeah, pretty decent. Probably the least crazy of the three, I would say, though, for sure. And then we move to the final card here, a new field spell, which, of course, because the Majesty one searches a field spell, you got to have the new field spell. This is Dragonic Pendulum. It's a field spell card. You can only use the second and third effects of this card once per turn. Also, it has Pendulum in the name, so I do think it's searchable off of... What's the card that searches any card with Pendulum in the name? It has 3 main effects. The first one says all DRACOSLAYER monsters on the field gain 300. Fine, like nice, just little bonus buff. 2, if a dragon DRACOSLAYER monster you control activates its effect, you can target one card on the field and destroy it. That's really, really cool. So if you can just get any dragon DRACOSLAYER to fire its effects on the opponent's turn, that makes me think of the Majesty one being able to pitch from hand as a quick effect for the protection. Then boom, you're able to just like pop a card on the opponent's turn or just get extra removal on your turn. That's a pretty solid effect. And 3, if this card on the field is destroyed, you can take any DRACOSLAYER or Dracoverlord monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it. Really, really solid float there, as we know with a lot of Pendulum cards, whether you're talking metal foes, whether you're talking even some of the cards today that say like do something, then pop a card. Pop a card to search, pop a card to set a card, whatever it is. That's pretty common in a lot of the more turbo Pendulum cards, like starters, extenders kind of thing. And the fact that you can just activate this, pop it to get a resource, and then this floats as well, just lets you go super plus in those kinds of decks. So really, really solid. It's really hard to tell. I say this every time I see a new Pendulum support, especially if it seems any kind of generically applicable to just good generic builds. It's really hard to see like where you would want to go with it. I'm not a Pendulum expert. I would call myself like a Zephyra expert, if anything, but nothing outside of that I feel super confident about. But I do like pendulums. I'm not a super combo-y person, but pendulums do combo in a very interesting way. It's just such an interesting, different mechanic that I do think they're cool, and I would definitely be down to mess around with these cards, especially if they do end up working with something like Zephyra or Metal Foes. Those are probably even Magispector. Those are like my 3 favorite pendulum archetypes to this point. But very, very cool all in all. Again, hard to say where they're at, but I feel like these cards overall are pretty good. I want to hear your thoughts though. Please let me know down below how, if you're more of like a generic pendulum player, let me know how you think these cards will apply and in what ways. How good are they going to be? And in what ways, what interactions do you think make them better than I'm giving them credit for, if you think so? But yeah, that's it for me here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff from me down the line, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.